When it comes to how we eat, we often don't tend to think too much about it. And one of the other challenges that comes up is the fact that for many of us, we wind up having either a family culture that we grew up in or a culture that we've created as adults that doesn't support healthy eating. And so today I am delighted to be speaking with Mary Collette Rodgers, who is going to help us learn exactly what we need to know to create a new eating culture. Mary Collette, thank you so much for being here.
Well, I'm so glad to be here. I love talking about this and being able to talk about it with you. It's just great.
Thank you. So let's start by asking that all important question. How did you get into holistic nutrition?
Oh, Mira, it was many, many years ago, probably 32 years ago, because that's how old my son is. And when he was just 6 months old and my daughter was 2, we started having a whole uh, raft of different health problems. My son was getting one ear infection after another, even while he was on antibiotics. My daughter, they were saying, oh, I'm sure she's got asthma because she was getting croup all the time. And I was just sick all the time with one virus after another. And back in those days, it was not common. We didn't know about naturopaths. But for some reason, I thought, I'm going to go see a naturopath. I'd heard about one. And he prescribed us a gluten-free, dairy-free diet. And back in those days, those were not common household words. And I have to laugh because sometimes we tell people, oh, we can't have any gluten or bread. And they say, oh, can you have waffles? Of course, nowadays we know that, but we even questioned it too. What is gluten? What's it in? And so it was quite a journey. But the amazing part and why I got into it so much is that just with that simple remedy, and we did have some herbal remedies as well, but basically it was just good nutrition that got us healthy. And when you come to realize that's all it takes, you just go, I got to share this with everybody. So just so many people in the healthy eating industry or the healthy eating field, I said, yeah, I've got to do something. So I've spent the last 30 years working on all sorts of products and skills and strategies to help people be able to do this in an everyday basis.
And that's amazing because 30 years ago, all of the gluten-like foods, all of the alternatives for dairy, all those things did not exist.
You are right
You
about
were
that.
figuring it out all on your own. And so that's quite a challenge. So I salute you for that.
Thank you.
So that really highlights how challenging it can be. It's not a simple thing to create like a healthy meal. Can we talk about what our food culture has to do with how we create like daily choices and build those habits?
Mary, you're bringing up something that I've thought about a lot over the years, and that in my 30 years, I've noticed that people are so troubled by what should we be eating? How do we eat well? What does that look like? And what I've come to over the years, I've advocated for this for many years, is that it's actually easier than we think. And like, for instance, you can make a meal of squash and pork chops and broccoli, or you can fry some tofu and zucchini with red peppers over rice. And the bottom line is really what we need to be doing is eating real whole foods. And yet that kind of can worry people. And I'm scooching to the side here because I want to show you just.
Oh, look at that. Beautiful food. Yeah.
Sometimes people are wondering, what is real whole food? And I explain it as things that come straight from the earth. And they haven't gone through a factory or a manufacturing facility to be turned into something else. And so things like squashes and all the vegetables and the beans and grains and nuts. And by the way, if you can see the lettuce over there, that's from my garden. I thought,
oh, that's
special
lovely.
edition, right?
Yeah. And I love how really it is very straightforward, but we have our taste buds and our ideas about food have been co-opted by food producers to be what's more convenient for them rather than what's best for us.
Absolutely. And when we talk about how simple it should be, it's interesting. I did a talk just a couple of weeks ago, and one of the attendees is a nutritionist. and mentioned a client of hers, a mother who was really trying to eat better. But she faced so many headwinds and so many challenges. Her husband didn't care about healthy eating. Her kids are addicted to junk food. The kitchen is a disaster. She doesn't even want to be there. She doesn't have any skills to back up on. And even going to the grocery store, where do you find healthy foods like this? And so it should be pretty simple to be able to make that meal of a pork chop, some squash, and some broccoli, right? But when you're facing all these different headwinds, it makes it pretty darn hard. And so this brings up the big question that I've been wrestling with is, okay, does that mean healthy eating is just a casualty of modern life? And I think that when we're up against these headwinds and challenges, we just breeze by them. We don't think about it. I think because we don't really think there's any solutions. Oh, well, I guess we just have to live with that. And so that then raises an even bigger question for me. And that's what's wrong with our world that this woman who wants to feed herself and her family well and simply make good meals that lead to good health and be the best person she was meant to be. Why does she face so many headwinds? Why do we not have the skills to simply be able to do that? And that's what gets me to this whole culture. We mentioned the new eating culture. What kind of culture lets this happen? That there's no support for healthy eating. That's bad enough. No support for shopping and enjoying the foods that keeps healthy. But even worse than this, and this gets to the point you mentioned just earlier, it's almost encouraging us to eat in a way that endangers our health. Our culture addicts us and our kids to foods that lead to overweight, chronic disease, anxiety, depression, learning disorders, all that kind of stuff. So I just have to ask, what kind of culture does that? And then you just have to agree that it's a rotted food culture and it needs to be replaced.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I struggle with a lot when I'm working with clients is this internal frustration about how food producers can do anything they want to food and they don't have to label it. They don't have to identify it. Like it has become the way of food. Whereas all those regenerative farmers and organic growers and people who want to grow what used to be just food now have to jump through hoops in order to get certified or qualified or have labeling on their food. And really, it's the reverse of what it should be. And
Absolutely.
and it's so challenging because I think a lot of people don't realize it happened a little bit at a time, like starting back around World War II, as we began to figure out how to, like, the industrialization of food really began on a larger scale. We'd had some prior to that, but not a lot. And then it's just gone. And like you said, it's become the dominant food culture. And so I guess part of it is that how do we help people make that shift? Because even people who want to be healthy, who want to make more nourishing choices for their body can sometimes kind of struggle. So what are things that they can do to step outside of that unsupportive, dominant eating culture?
And you bring up a good point because it isn't peculiar that we've got a culture that doesn't support us eating in a way that supports the thriving and improvement of the species. We're going extinct. That's crazy, isn't it? And I think you hit the nail on the head when it's the convenience food industry. I'm sure there's some other factors that go along with it, but it's the convenience food industry. And I think if we want to solve it, we have to understand that there's two aspects to the problem with convenience food. And one of them is pretty obvious. And that is the fact that they've addicted us. Yeah, we know
I
about that.
know it's all so hyper palatable at this point. It's that potato chip commercial. Bet you can't eat just one. No, you can't. They made it so that you can.
You can't. And so they've addicted us in taste and the convenience and the cheapness and the ubiquitousness. It's everywhere. But a little less obvious is they addicted us to the convenience too. I don't have to worry about planning meals. I don't have to be home to make meals. I don't have to shop. Anywhere I go, there we go. I've got food there. So that one's a little less obvious. But the problem is that, yeah, it's convenient. We think it tastes great, but it's killing us. Let's be honest. It's at least making us sick. And I argue that it's killing us as well. Here, Mira, the fact is that nobody's got a gun to our head saying you must eat these convenience processed foods. And I think most people know that they're not that great for us. So what do? You make your own meals with real whole foods. It's really an easy solution. But like we were saying, something that looks easy, we've got all these other things going on that make it not so simple. And this is where I get to the second aspect of the problem with convenience foods. And that is this subtle thing. You even just referenced it. It was back after World War II in the 50s, where in addition to making and promoting these foods to us, they also have a really interesting and subtle marketing campaign going on to make us devalue and disrespect the kitchen and cooking themselves.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more because I have frequently talked about the fact that when I was in middle school, everybody, boys and girls, had to take home economics and we had to learn how to cook real food.
Yeah.
And as I had kids, my oldest got some. By the time we got to my youngest, it was whack and crack dough wrapped around a hot dog, making pigs in a blanket was considered cooking. And she would, Mom, we cooked in school today. I'm like, what'd you make? And she told me, I'm like, that's horrible. And I think that's part of the problem, Mary Collette. It's been like this slow, gradual decline.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. A fascinating book on this, Mira, and I don't know if you've ever seen this, but it's called Something from the Oven. We'll want to put that in the show notes for sure. Yeah. And the author is Laura Shapiro. And what's so interesting about this book is that she described, I was always wondering, how did this happen? How did this happen? I finally read her book and discovered that, in fact, it happened because of the marketing that's been going on since World War II. So that means 60 years we've been, and the food industry itself, she documents it all. The industry itself took aim at home cooking after World War II. And is it okay if I read just a couple?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Because I think you're going to be stunned. The food industry rapturously envisioned a day when virtually all contact between the cook and the raw makings of dinner would be obsolete. By the 1950s, magazines and newspapers were conjuring scenes in which traditional kitchen-centered home life was being carried out in perfectly delightful fashion without a trace of traditional kitchen-centered home cooking. So there you go. That starts us by dismissing the kitchen as old-fashioned and outmoded. But the industry went on. They also wanted to denigrate cooking because we needed to make sure women wouldn't go near the kitchen. Right. And so what they started doing was dismissing as outmoded any chore more laborious than applying a finishing touch. Nobody should have to dirty their hands in the kitchen. And then most damaging of all, though, was their marketing around time. And what, Laura Shapiro, she talks about how there was a survey done about this time. Women generally did not find that they had any trouble finding time to make the meals for their families. But during the time became an obsession of the food industry and eventually of all American homemakers as a manufactured sense of panic began to pervade even day-to-day cooking. Advertisements and stories plowed across the media, reminding readers again and again how busy they were, how frantic their days, how desperately they needed products and recipes for quick meals. Mm-hmm. When we hear people say, I don't have time to cook, where do you think that came from?
It's so interesting that you should read that because at one point in my life, I was a 4-H mom. And
I was a 4-H member.
Yeah. And so our 4-H group didn't raise animals. It was a skill group. So we learned how to do things like shear Angora goats and spin wool and make soap and do all those kinds of things. And my co-leader was an amazing cook and I like to be in the kitchen. So we decided we were going to do an experiment for the kids and we got a boxed cake mix and a bunch of ingredients to see were you really going to save so much time? And it turned out that the time savings was really only about 5 minutes. But what you got had so many more negative ingredients in them.
Honestly.
I know it was really crazy because how long does it take to scoop and put things together? But I think part of it, like you said, though, unfortunately, the culture has shifted to the point where we've gotten away from that. And so, how do we help people get back to creating a new food culture that where cooking is respected and eating is enjoyed, not merely something to race through?
Absolutely. Because as long as we've got a food culture that's blocking us from the kitchen and cooking, we can't escape the convenience
Yeah.
food trap. The escape hatch is barred, is what I say. Mira, a lot of times in a lot of, so the popular topic today is limiting beliefs.
Mhm.
Thought about how we kind of have some limiting beliefs around the kitchen and cooking and that are really detracting from our lives. So I think that's a really good question is how do we get rid of and replace is what I say, replace this unsupportive eating culture. And I think you got to remember that remember those two aspects of the convenience food problem.
Sure.
Problem one is the addictiveness of the foods that they're manufacturing. There's not a lot of I don't think there's a lot we can do. My hat's off to people like you who are trying to make us aware of it. There's a lot of food activists out there trying to get regulations enacted and stuff. And that's great. I think keep trying. But I don't know that the political will is really there to do that in a significant way. So I think like my advice is don't wait for that to happen. Yeah, let's go ahead and start replacing this rotted convenience eating culture and create a new eating culture. And I hope everyone will join me in this. And now, does that sound pretty monumental? Yes, of course it does. Are we mere humans entitled to do that? And I want to remind people that a culture belongs to the people of that culture,
Absolutely.
not belong to corporations, especially ones who have an interest in profits that's far greater than their interest in our health and the health of society. So absolutely, we are entitled and capable of creating our own new eating culture that values, honors, respects, and even celebrates really good food.
And so I'd love to interject for just a second because I really want to share that I feel for a lot of people it feels so overwhelming to look at the way the food system is right now and think, what can I do about it? And my philosophy as the ingredient guru, I'm not trying to change the entire system. I would love it if that would happen.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Even with an army of people behind me, we still don't have perhaps the same impact that all those corporations do. And so instead, my goal is to educate consumers and encourage them, just clean up your own little space. Take care of your diet, your family, your corner of the world, because the truth of the matter is, and you alluded to this, food producers aren't necessarily in the business of making food. They're in the business of making money. And food is how they do it. And the cheaper and faster and more shelf stable they can make it, the better it is for them. However, if we make changes, if enough of us one at a time make changes, they start paying attention. They go, oh, we got to change. We got to address that. So we look at things like how much fun they made of people who didn't want high fructose corn syrup in their diet decades ago. And now there's a whole bunch of things that say no HFCS, and they may have switched to other not great for you sweeteners. But the thing is, we can encourage change one household at a time. And so I'd love to ask you, like, what is one small action step that you think somebody could make that would help them begin to make that shift to their new diet culture?
Yeah. And I think that I would break it down into 3 steps.
Okay.
And I know that at first it can be a little hard to think about creating a new culture because it's not something you can buy or produce or manufacture, and no government edict is going to do it. It's just going to take our own thoughtfulness and our conversations with other people, and it's creating new assumptions that we act from. And I feel like step one is going to be awareness. It always is. It's going to first start being aware. And I hope this podcast starts making people more
Yeah.
aware of what's going on. But look at ads and think about the comments that you hear from people. Think about the conversations that you have with people, like at work with friends, with family. I know there's a lot of conversations that go, "What are you having for dinner?" And it's like, we tend to do that. And it's maybe hold off before chiming in, but at least just be aware that those kind of things are going on. And step two is to begin to shift your thinking. And that is the mission of my nonprofit, The New Kitchen, is to create this new view of the kitchen and cooking that's a little friendlier. And so when you hear comments like that, yes, it's true. Cooking does take work. There's no question. But what we just don't have full disclosure. And so what we don't hear is there are some upsides. Those don't get any press. On the upsides of the work is that it does give you reward and satisfaction. Here's what I wrote in my book. Do you mind if I just read a small
No, not at all.
Okay. As I write my book, in our current convenience eating culture, effort has been given a bad rap. In particular, we've been convinced that we shouldn't have to put out effort to make good meals when so many grab and go options are always available. What this assumption fails to acknowledge, however, is that effort rewards us in many ways too. We get food that serves instead of harms our health, dishes that taste just the way that we like, and food that's very affordable. In a new eating culture, we celebrate the joy and reward that comes from putting out effort to make good meals. We get to feel good about taking good care of ourselves and triumph in being self-reliant, resilient, and having a measure of control over our health. In other words, the effort we put into something is a measure of the benefits we reap from it. So as we begin to recast those assumptions, think about them, become aware of them, recast them, then we can begin to speak from a new mindset. And if you're going to make a meal, I know there's crazy screaming going on in your head saying, "It's work, it takes too much time." Well, would you just quiet it down, allow yourself to make a meal and experience some of the joy and the goodness and satisfaction that comes from making a really good meal. And you talked about people doing this little bit by little bit. We're all going to have to do that a little bit. And it takes time, just like, what you say, it takes time to clean out some of the things from your diet. It's going to take time to rework these ingrained assumptions. Remember, we've been heavily marketed to for 6 decades. So it's going to take time. And so we have to just keep working at it. But I remember reading this article, I just read it around New Year's Day, because apparently there's some movement to get everybody out hiking on New Year's Day so that we all exercise in the winter. And it started out with just a few people. And several years later, all of a sudden, it's all over the country and stuff. So we have to hold out hope that we can do this. And it may take us a few years, but bit by bit, we're going to take and reverse this crazy culture that we have that denies us the right to take good care of ourselves and our health. Yeah, so I think those would be my 3 steps there. And I'm just hoping that with all of this, when we have a mother who just wants to feed her family well, but she has no support from her husband, her kids, her society, I hope we'll be able to, our culture will give her the support she needs to be able to do that.
And I love that you said that. One of the things that I do for myself, like I will confess there are a lot of times when I go sliding into the kitchen, oh, gotta make dinner if we want to eat at a reasonable hour, because I do cook from scratch. However, there are also times where I manage to get down there at a reasonable time. But one of the first things that I always do is I put on an apron because I have a collection of aprons. And for me, that's okay. We're going into this quieter time and I love it. And the other thing is my husband, when he's home and available, he'll come and help me in the kitchen. And when my kids were younger, they learned how to cook and sometimes they would come into the kitchen. I think if we make it a family affair, and it can just be that connecting time. It's like a really wonderful way to add to the beauty of the meal because you all spent time together making it. So I love that. And as a matter of fact, one of my favorite experiences recently I was on a trip and I went to visit my aunts, and one of my aunts had me over to her house and taught me how to make a family recipe that I didn't know how to make. And just spending that time together is so wonderful. And I think we see, like you said, we see cooking as a chore. And if we can instead learn to look at that as like this slow down, getting ready for this nourishing, wonderful meal, and then taking that time to connect with each other, it can be really fabulous.
Absolutely. We can begin seeing those upsides. And Mary, you took one of the new eating culture's tenets right out of my mouth. Is that meal making is a family affair. It's a household affair. And so, yes, we don't just come in. I tell the story of the little red hen. We don't come in and expect somebody else to do all the work. We just get to sit down at the table and eat.
Sure.
Have a new ethos, which is like, oh, that, yeah, everybody helps. And it may be small, maybe bigger. But yeah, everybody's involved in that. And nobody's left all alone in the kitchen to be lonely and working over themselves.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Mary Collette, thank you so much. This has been just amazing. And I love this topic. And I love that you are on the vanguard of helping people learn how to create a new kitchen culture, a new eating culture for themselves. And I know right before we hopped on, you said that you had actually gone above and beyond and created a little gift that you wanted to offer everyone. Can you share about that?
You betcha. And this is just, I don't know if you can see it very well because it might have a reflection on it, but it's a little booklet and it has two parts to it. And to understand the two different parts, you need to know that one of the big goals of our nonprofit is meal making transformation, is to help people transform the way they make meals so that it can become so manageable that we can really do this and enjoy the health benefits of it pretty much on a daily basis. And there are three parts to meal making transformation: being new in your kitchen, being new, and that means learning how to manage your time in your cooking environment so it's easy to get in there, smooth and efficient. Being new in your cooking, learning to simplify cooking, get confident and comfortable at the stovetop. And then, of course, being new in your kitchen, which is what being new in your thinking, which is what we've talked about today. So in this booklet, what I've offered is two things. The first of those goes to that being new in your kitchen. I'm sorry, I'm getting everything, all the news mixed up. Cooking. And one of these 10 quick tips to get healthy meals on the table fast.
Oh, that's lovely.
Whole raft of ideas there. And it's at the top, it says permission granted. And
I love it.
that in a new eating culture, yes, you have perfect permission to be able to make simple meals and be okay with that. And there's so many ideas. So little homework is find one idea in here. There's so many. One idea you can make in the next week or two that will make meal making easier for you. The second part of this free gift gets into a little quiz, because what I realized is that, like we've just been talking, this whole culture thing, by its nature, we don't think about it because they're just these underlying assumptions. So I created a little quiz that you can go through, just 10, 12 questions to help you stop and go, wow, do I have some of these limiting beliefs? So go ahead and take that quiz. And then if it turns out you have more than one or two, can I suggest you maybe do a little work around that and see if that doesn't make it easier? And to help you on that, I've gone through 3 or 4 of the common problems that people come up with, common limiting beliefs. And that can help you get started about how a new eating culture might help you work through those mind barriers that are blocking your way to healthy eating. And then, Mira, is it okay I could share with people the way to get this is really easy? Just email me.
Sure, absolutely.
Put free gift in the subject line. And my email's pretty easy. It's MCR for Mary Collette Rodgers. So MCR at thenewkitchen.org.
And I'll make sure to put that in the notes down below as well. Yeah, absolutely.
But you also include in there, and this includes you, Mira, any other ideas that you have about what would you like a new eating culture to look like? Because it's not about me to create. It's about all of us to create.
Sure.
In some of my other workshops, people have contributed some of the most fun, interesting ideas. So if you'll email me, include those in your email, and I would love to add them to my collection.
That sounds great. We will definitely put that in the notes below. And I thank you so much for sharing everything with us about how we got here and some things that we can do to really begin that shift away from this non-nutritive, non-supportive,
Yes.
unhealthy food environment.
Oh, Mira, I just really appreciated the opportunity. Like I said, I love talking about this. And I hope that it can help as people
Yeah.
watch you and follow you. Maybe this can be one more tool in the toolbox that can help them make that leap all the way over to that wonderful, healthful diet.
That sounds great. Folks, thank you so much for watching today. Don't forget to check the email address down below so you can get Mary Colette's beautiful free gift. That's so generous of you. And make sure that I will also put in the link to the book that she mentioned and link to the new kitchen so you'll be able to connect there as well. And remember, in all you do, make today a healthy day. Bye, folks.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for watching.